Hello and welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. I nearly went to say good morning, but it's just a hello because Lynn Festa, the wonderful Lynn Festa, lovely to meet you, have you on the show, Lynn. I shouldn't say meet you, but welcome. Is all the
Thank
way
you.
from Western Massachusetts. I don't even know if I got that right. How you pronounce it.
Yes,
I
yeah,
did. Okay,
you got
great.
it.
And
Yes.
it's like quarter to six in the PM. On Tuesday, and it's quarter to eight here in the morning. I know people are probably going, "Why is she talking about the time at the start of the show?" But I always find it really cool that we're in different zones. Um, but yeah, I'm super excited to have you on board or have you here, Lynn. We've got a lot to unpack, and let's just quickly recap a little bit about you before I hand it over to you. You're a seasoned occupational therapist, wellness coach, and advocate for highly sensitive persons, HSP little s. I hadn't really ever heard of that. I'd heard of highly sensitive persons, but didn't realize it was actually a term as such. So I'm keen to hear a little bit more about that. 35 years, over 35 years in clinical practice, you transitioned from traditional healthcare roles to focus on coaching and education, helping professionals navigate burnout and harness their sensitivity as a strength. I am enthralled about this one, and because I've had burnout, and so I'm really interested to hear about how you help professionals navigate it because it is such a foggy navigation doing it on your own and how you actually fully recover. And sensitivity is a strength because we've always been told stop being so sensitive, don't be so sensitive, but you are harnessing this as a strength, which I absolutely love. The founder of Lynn Festa Coaching, you combine clinical expertise in positive psychology, as well as science-backed, from what I understand, science-backed and grounded, reality-grounded approaches, offering individualized coaching, workshops, and speaking engagements. Lynn, your work emphasizes resilience, self-compassion, and the development of sustainable practices for well-being. I also want to talk about well-being versus whole being, but let's
Yes.
hand it over to you. Hopefully, I got all that right. But
You
yeah, so I'm going
did,
to have you
yeah.
here. Tell us a bit about your journey.
Oh, sure. And I'm thrilled to be here. So my journey, so I was marching along. I'm an occupational therapist, graduated in 1988, and I was marching along being specializing in hand therapy, which I loved. And then I realized, wow, things are starting to get a little redundant for me too. So sometimes I say, did I burn out or did I bore out?
Mm.
Because I kind of lost spark. And it's really fun. And I love telling this story. And it's really important because one of my best friends is from Melbourne.
Oh, really?
And
Have
shout
you
out to
been to
Karen.
Melbourne? So have you been to Melbourne?
Not yet.
Oh my gosh,
No,
please
she's
get
here in the
here.
States. But yeah. But she taught me the Australian accent, so my ear is good now. Um, so she had actually lost her job and she didn't really like her job. And I said, okay, so what are you going to do? And she said, well, I really want to go be a triathlon coach, which she went and did. And of course, knocked it out of the park because she's an amazing person. So she turned the tables because that's what she does too. And she said, well, what would you do? I said, oh, I've always wanted to be like a life coach or something. I've been reading about it and it just speaks to me. So she said, well, go do it. So I did. And I signed up for my first life coaching in 2013, Martha Beck. Love her work. And started to go through it and realized, oh, okay, I needed to practice some of these tools, but I was also still in the clinic. And I realized, okay, well, what do I have to lose? So I actually started practicing the tools in the clinic. And I noticed a shift that I didn't expect to see. And I noticed that A, I started having more fun. B, my patients, or my clients, I should say, were starting to settle. And I just thought, wow, I'm on to this. This thing of a reset of getting out and being more of like approaching the coaching. And it made me go back to making sure I was treating the whole person and all of that. So that just kept evolving. And, hook and crook, and, life takes us on these journeys. And I had a period where I um, was unemployed, what I didn't expect to be. So again, you just kind of life just kind of finds different ways. And that's when 2015, I really started to really dive into doing more of this work and realized how much I loved it. And then brought it to in our world, the hand therapy world and the occupational therapy world. And at the time, almost 10 years ago now, oh my goodness, it was kind of like the fringe stuff because then nobody was talking about burnout. It was like a bad word. It meant like you were weak and you couldn't keep up. And
Or you'd
then
had a
people
nervous
said, what was
breakdown.
wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But you were told when you're normally like this kind of, now we would say a really resilient, strong person, like, oh my God, what is going on here? So it made me start to unpack that. And looking back now, I'm really glad, even though it was like, of course, totally scary to go out there and start to present this information. But again, people were hungry for it and starting to have those conversations about it. So it just kind of kept evolving from there too. So now it's actually, and here, especially, with the pandemic, COVID 2020, we actually closed the hand therapy practice that I had. I actually, this was in practice with my husband, who was the hand surgeon. We closed it. So I really was like, okay, I get to really go for this. And that was prime for burnout, especially. And then I talk about in the past 5 years, all in the States here at least, everyone was talking about, oh, healthcare, everyone's burned out. And we're like, yeah, we've been burned out. You're just not making it a bad word anymore. So that became something too. So there was some traction with that. And then what I'm afraid is happening is people are kind of saying, oh, that was like so last week. I'm like, no, it's actually still here. So I'm so glad we get to talk about it, keep this topic front and center
Yeah.
because it's still there. It's
Mm,
still happening and the systems are still set. So there's more of a conversation around it too.
mm.
So, and there is starting to be a shift in workplaces because that's where we mostly get burnt out.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I just want to speak to the high sensitivity. So it's called the highly sensitive person. It's on the work of Elaine. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm spacing
Oh,
her last name.
I
But
know who you're
highly
talking
sensitive
about.
Elaine.
Uh,
Yes. Oh my God, she's like the queen of it, and I'm just like totally
yes.
embarrassing myself.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Okay.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God, Elaine Aaron. Oh my God. Okay. Well, I'm human, right? Elaine Aaron started it, and it's highly scientific. There are 1,000 peer-reviewed, deep, clinically
Yeah.
researched articles and research done. So it's a thing. It's 30% of the population. It's 50-50 male, female. It's in 100 species of animals. Um, and I think the most important part that people need to realize too, which is extremely important. So the one point I want to get across is it's a trait that's in
That's right.
us. You're born with it. And you can't change being highly sensitive any more that you can say, well, why don't you just be taller? Like, well, I can't. You can't. It's who you are. So what I found was I'm also a highly sensitive person, was we tend to burn out a little bit
I think
more
I am
because of
like
how we're
since
wired.
yeah, I'm a highly sensitive.
Right? Yes, yes.
I was
And this
like,
realization is right. You spend your whole life thinking like, what's wrong? I'm like, I can go and do all of this stuff, but then I need quiet and I want to be in nature and I don't really want to talk to more people or we're super observant.
and
Almost like
aware.
sponges of energy. Yes. And that's where it's like actually, again, it's a real thing. It's called emotional contagion. And that's been studied that you will pick up subconsciously, unconsciously, without even realizing the mood of everything around you too. So sometimes those of us who do that without understanding that our bodies, our nervous systems are doing that with or without us, that's happening. And sometimes as soon as you understand when that's happening, you realize, okay, let me manage that. So that's where my job and my mission as a coach, occupational, I call myself an OT who specializes in this, is to understand the superpower. of being a highly sensitive person and an understanding that the FOMO isn't real for us. We think we're missing out, but we secretly don't really want to go anyway. But we think we're supposed to because the other 70%. So, and that's the other thing, and I'll wrap up with that is the world is not built for the 30% of us who are highly sensitive. And I'm sorry about that. It's built for the 70% that want to go to the party afterwards or go to the loud restaurant and think that that's fun. Don't want to stay after work and socialize because you just spent all day with them and it's time to go for your walk or your bike ride or whatever you want to do to reset your nervous system too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the joy of like letting people understand how to work with it as a positive.
Wow. Wow. Gosh, there's so much to unpack here. Like there's so much to talk about. Like I'm kind of intrigued around. I've got two questions. Bore out. I love that
Sure.
term because I think, do you think like in terms of burnout, bore out is part of the burnout in terms of you are continuing to do something that you've completely got no, it's almost like this. You're like your head is in your hands, and you're just like, that's what I was like. I was just like, I'd wake up every day going, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to do another day like today. I'm so bored, but I'm so exhausted. But you keep doing it,
Yeah.
and so it's almost like
Yeah.
it's a for me. Yeah, and I called it like a full identity piece, right? Because you're like, I don't even know who I am or what I'm doing anymore. So there's that bit
Yeah.
around. And do you know where the actual term burnout came from? Have you actually studied that? Like where it came from?
Yes, it's one of my favorite stories too. It's 1974, something Schugenberg or something. Frecken, I haven't looked this up in a while, but he was doing research. He was in Northern California and working with clients who were suffered from drug addiction too. So he noticed, so they were burnouts as a noun. Of course, we'd never do that now, but in the 70s, it was a free for all, especially here in the States. Um, but then he noticed his staff was losing their get up and go and dealing with a population that, is a lot. So that's when he started to research himself to realize like, oh my God, his get up and go got up and went is kind of like burnout too. Like that kind of like, I can do this. No, I just can't. I just can't. So that's when he started to really start, and that's where he termed it.
Wow.
And
Okay.
then people in the 80s started studying it too. Maslow and Leader, those
Yeah.
names I do remember. And they're in the 80s really started to put pen to paper. And I love that they keep doing research on it, but you can go back to the book that they wrote in the 80s on it, and all the work is still there too. So
Yeah, it feels.
that's the history of
Oh,
burnout.
that's yeah, no, thank you. That's a really good history lesson. I'm sure I've read it, but I mean that's the thing with burnout, isn't it? Like it's been around for ever and a day. And
Hmm.
when you look at how far we've moved forward versus how long it's been around, it's like I'd love your opinion on this. How far do you think we have moved forward? Like if you talk about the healthcare industry, I came out of the advertising communications industry. There's a lot
Mm.
of different industries where it's still very prevalent. And there's all these quick fix solutions like we're doing this and we're doing that, but it's like burnout isn't a quick fix. Like recovery of burnout is not a quick fix. Like you know this, I know this. You think it is, and you might have a holiday or you might have a week off or you might do stuff, but it's like and then you just go again. You just get up and go again. Do you know what I mean? And then you drop down again. What's your
Yeah,
thought
because
on
nothing changed.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. So again, we did start to have the switch from people talking about it. Like when people came to me early on to get coached, it was almost, cloaked in secrecy. Now, obviously, like, my coaching is, highly confidential, but it was like almost like, I can't believe I have to talk about this. It used to be like being injured as musicians back when I did that, like when you never, as a musician, would ever admit to being ever so slightly injured. And now it's like proactive, like in wellness and things like that. So people had to talk about it, but it was like covered in shame, because you felt like you couldn't cut it. But it wasn't a sustainable thing. And again, here again in the 80s and the 90s, especially in the States, it was productivity and money, money, money. And, it was just set up for failure, basically. So there has been a switch. The National Academy of Medicine here in the States has been working diligently on this. I actually did get to attend a meeting in Chicago in 2019. I was the only OT there, but I was like, I'm going to this meeting because it was going to talk about healthcare and the prevalence of burnout and how it's got to stop because we already have all these other shortages here, and that the last thing we need is
Mm,
more people getting out, which sadly, a paper that I just read this morning on it from the National Academy of Medicine talks about like 60% of all healthcare workers, still identify as being burnt out. So the work is still there. I think having the conversations, and one of the things I talk about all the time, one of these days it'll get through, is like, you don't have to spend a lot of money on the program. It's free. It's called you sit down and you talk to your team. You talk to your team about systems. You talk to your team about what's working.
yeah.
You talk to your team about the people in the trenches doing the work, about what's not working. Because if you go and you have these conversations, you'll say, well, I'll use the example of healthcare. I worked in one place where we were still handwriting things, which is insane.
Mm,
But the way it was said, we had to write the same note almost 3 times. Okay. Well, our notes weren't getting done because we were so busy trying to see our patients. Or you had to stay then an extra hour that you weren't paid for to do your notes, or you got in trouble. So look at the systems and look at what's working and what's not working. I made the joke in a podcast I did a few years ago for hand therapists, and I said, look, we really don't want you to just bring us lunch. Bringing us lunch isn't going to cure our burnout. And everyone joked, like, no, we still want lunch. And I said, no, that's fine, except that sometimes when you just, I'm bringing, pizza to my team. Okay, well, maybe the team doesn't want to sit there. Maybe they want to take the piece of pizza and go sit someplace else. Maybe they want to have the conversation of like, I don't need pizza. I don't know, but it's just like the expectation, like, well, I brought them pizza.
I
Like,
know,
what's the
yeah.
problem?
It's
I'm like, you have to look at, right? You have to
yeah,
look at the
yeah, you do. You
sustainability
do. Because
of what you're asking.
yeah, oh my gosh, you make some really great points here, and firstly, there is this real shame. I know when I, first, actually, I'd had burnout for years, but it was just, and it was like chronic stress. But then, at the tipping point, my doctor, he's going to come on the show at some point later this year. Too busy. He's too busy at the moment. I'm like, you keep telling, he's always like giving me great advice on,
Thing everybody.
you know,
Yeah, right.
detoxing in life. He says it to me. But yeah, I remember him saying, you're officially burnt out. And the shame I had around it because, and that was part of my identity piece, was because I was like, what? Like, I'm rock bottom at the moment, and I was always at the top of my game. And maybe this is a connection back to the emotion and emotionally sensitive person in terms of, I was always high achieving. I cared. I was, all about my team and my staff and everything, and the business and my clients. And then it was all
Go,
those
go, go.
go, go, go. And then I just crashed and burned. And I was just like, oh. I'm not that person
Mm,
anymore. And I had this real shame around it because I was like, I'm a failure. Like I've failed because I haven't been able to keep up was where I went I went down that whole rabbit hole. And that took me a long
yeah.
time, even therapy to get my head around, just strategize around, how like just making sense of all of it because I really did kind of I wanted that I wanted to go back to what I was, but I wasn't. But then actually I realized, no, I don't want to. Why would I want to go back there? Like it was, but it was just this. who am I now? What am I now? Am I worthy? Who's going to want to be interested in what I'm doing because I'm not that anymore. I'm not at the top of my game. Like, it was that kind of whole, oh, she's burnt out or she's crashed and burned sort of thing. That was me. I actually, and it's probably the first time I've actually chatted about this like we're chatting now. Like
Thank you for this.
I've chatted a lot about my
Yeah.
burnout in different experiences and different parts of that journey, but I haven't talked about that piece. And
Mhm.
I still battle with it sometimes, Lynn, where I'm like, I'm not that person anymore, and I'm still navigating my way through in terms of this is me. Yes, I'm still the same. I'm the same person, but I'm a different person, and I don't operate that way. I'm still I still have to catch myself out when I'm performing, and then I'm like, oh, slow down, or my body just goes and no, like and tells me you're stopping.
Yeah.
But it's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably something you talk a lot with your clients about, but that's a really hard thing as a person who's experienced burnout to get their head around and to really be okay with it and be kind to yourself about it. I don't know if do you know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
taken me a
So some
lot.
of the self-compassion work that I always bring up is the work of Kristen Neff.
Yes.
And the best part too, and you just did everybody who listens to this a huge service because you talked about it. And when you talk about it, you normalize it and you allow others, you give permission for other people to say, oh, yeah, actually, oh, I did that. Yeah, that's how I was feeling. But chances are they're listening to me and saying, I don't know, I don't see her as, less than or not good enough. So understanding that there's so many people in that boat, and those of us who are a highly sensitive, I think we tend to burn out much quicker. And I use the analogy of like we're high-end cars that you wouldn't drive in fourth gear or fifth gear all the time. Like, so say you had a car, would you never change the oil in your car? And everybody says, "Oh my God, you'd ruin the car." And I said, "Well, what's the difference then if you're not changing the oil in your body, so to speak, again, metaphor, um, that why would you do that? Why would you put the cheap gas in that's not right for the car? Okay, bad food, whatever, those things that, are supposed to not be good for us, obviously not good for us, but, not taking care of yourself. You're like, no, of course I'm going to put the good stuff in my car. I'm like, okay, so put that in your body. Like, so take that analogy and you go and you get your car tuned up.
Yeah.
But why are you not tuning up your body? And the other thing too is if you go back and look at it, anybody who burns out was was performing at a level that wasn't sustainable.
No.
Full stop. It wasn't sustainable. So if you never took a break, and even when you took a break, that's when I start to talk about like, okay, when somebody's on vacation or on holiday, I should say, I love that. Um, they're away. I mean, there is no emergency
I
that they
agree.
need to be for. And there's nothing. There is nothing. And if there is, then go back and look, bring it back. Look at your systems. Like set up your systems to thrive. Because then that's what you can do. It's like what's working, what's not working. And maybe that person, again, I was married to a physician, they never get away. Even when no matter where we went in the world, the joke was somebody broke their wrist. Um, and that's okay, but there's still like some boundaries too.
Yes.
So understanding that too, understanding, okay, but we're only going to check our email once a day or something, if you absolutely have to. But again, go back and set up the systems to be sustainable.
Yeah, I love, and I was going to come to systems because I think you're absolutely right. And this, like it's like when you're talking about the car and the oil. I think about it like human biology. a business or an organization is like a human biology. And so that system has to be, like you say, I call it optimally thriving, but you have to be putting everything into that system for it to optimally thrive versus just running it on an oily rag or, running it with no oil where the systems are completely, the car generally, the biology then starts to fall apart. And so when you're part of a bigger system that isn't thriving, unfortunately, sometimes, well, you generally do. You get spat out of that system and you burn out from that system. And I think, again, coming back to, and this is nothing around being a victim or a victim mindset, but when you fall out of that system and you burn out, I think sometimes you go, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? When actually the system failed you. The system failed you.
Yeah.
Who's actually looking after you? People were fully aware I was completely burnt out when I was, but it was like there was nothing being done about it. And I look back now and I'm like, I knew I was burnt out. Everyone could see, but I wasn't able to pull myself out of it. And so I think that happens
Yeah.
a lot. And that's part of a system, right? A system that isn't
Mhm.
flourishing, isn't thriving. And I
Yeah.
truly believe you can't have a system without a culture, and you can't have a culture without a system. So we could think about it from a well-being perspective as well, because well-being fits into culture, whole being, all of that. And for me, that, you know, we are still looking at systems that are somewhat disconnected in totality from the business to the team to the individual. Whereas I'm all about, well, how do you interconnect it all together so that you do get that system that is
Mhm.
completely thriving? And then the leaders and the teams, the individuals, they're all thriving and they're all performing at their best or shining their brightest in a sustainable way that is sustainable to be able to continue to perform the way we want them to perform.
Mhm. Yeah. The other thing that's come up too, which I'm glad about because I started again talking about it 10 years ago and they were like, what is she talking about? Is boundaries and understanding that. And again, especially those of us who identify as like 30% of us are highly sensitive. And anybody who's listening to this and has a team of more than three people, you know, one chances are one of the people is going to be highly sensitive statistically. And so understanding boundaries and understanding like the world isn't going to come to an end if you don't stay and being and more being reasonable too.
Mm.
Like don't come at 5 o'clock and say, I need this tomorrow morning. Well, you should, again, reasonable what's gonna combust too. And if you need to do that, then understand that then the next day that person leaves at 2 o'clock or something, but again, not revving that engine constantly. So the work of boundaries has helped a lot of us too to understand the no is a complete sentence. And the other thing that I bring up a lot with my clients too is they're like, but I said, well, did you say anything? And they said, no. And I said, well, the saying is when you permit, you promote.
Mm.
So when you're not speaking up and saying, again, I go back to healthcare, no, I'm not going to see, a, an actual add-on at the end of the day or through lunch when that's actually not necessary. I need my break. That's okay. But until you speak up, if you just keep doing it and doing it, they're going to say, well, Bee's doing it. She seems fine. And we know she's tough and she's not going to say anything. So, she's not going to say anything. We're not going to say anything. So that kind of like speaking up and kind of standing your ground too, and is also incredibly difficult for those of us who are used to just, people pleasing
Yeah, I was
and
about to
want
say.
everybody to be happy and the hardest worker and, A plus or die, so that those are just patterns that, it makes us who we are, these really cool people, right? But it also can be our superpower, but it can then be our kryptonite too. So it's getting better at figuring out like, oh, yeah, next time I'm gonna I'm going to fail better that's the next time,
Awareness
or
around
just
it.
kind of understand that, right?
Yeah.
So just really understanding that, that understanding of not, you don't, you know, bringing it down a notch too.
Mm.
So, and I also love you can tell I love analogies. I actually had a patient a while ago say, "Do you take a class in this?" I said, "No, but wouldn't that be fun?"
I was
Because
gonna
I
say
think analogies
you
help.
should write a book in analogies. You could write a whole book
Right?
about it.
I know. I'm like, one of these days I'll write my book. But so, because I think that helps people to understand. You just can't throw out these terms.
No.
Um, yeah, right. Is just it's like a relay too. So you're a team. So you have to take care of like, the fastest runner, of course, and you have to pass the baton, but then so there's maybe one person at a time can be full throttle. But you have to allow that person to back off. And then you hand it off to the next person and you practice that. And again, perfect example of a system that works is handing off the baton to the next person, the next person. And then the whole team can thrive.
Yeah, which for me is that like that group flow when you are collectively thriving and you're all performing at your best. But you're also
Yeah.
you're individually contributing, but then you're also contributing as a team, right? In terms of like what you're talking about. Like it's not just
Yeah. And let it
you.
be
Yeah.
like one person, but back off. And,
Oh, I like
you
that. I
know,
feel that's really
and
quite
yeah.
meditating for
Yeah,
me right
like
now. Like,
that's okay, right? Yeah,
I
like
can
a little
feel the
hand
energy
shout
coming
out to
through.
hand
Yeah.
therapists around the world. So that's also how I look at it. It's like take that bigger picture. Like, as I talk, I did a TEDx called Integrity Based Medicine, and I talk about it's based on the story of Trudy Ederle, who was the first woman to swim the English Channel, like in 1926 or something. And and she asked like what for? So I love that of like what for? Like why are we doing the system that isn't helping anybody? Like why aren't we setting up our office in a way that's environmentally because people are highly sensitive. There's lights, there's too much noise. Make it an environment in which people can thrive too.
Mm.
So there's so much, that's why I say there's so much low-hanging fruit that you don't need to spend.
No, you don't. You
You
don't.
don't need to pay somebody $10,000 to come in and say, why don't you just ask people what they need?
Mm. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And even like with the system, like, just what you've just highlighted and it's just reminded me as well, why aren't we speaking up? Because quite often the people that are in the system understand the system the most. And so, and yet, we quite often bring in, different people to make these assessments and diagnostics. But unless you're talking to the
Uh,
team, unless you're talking to the people within that system, how can you actually make a diagnosis on something on a system when you're not part of it and you're not actually in it? So for me, that's really wanting to understand and digging deep and understanding from the team or the people and the leaders, what is why is this system disconnected? What do we need to let go of? What do we need to recreate, reimagine, reshape? I mean, that's what I use in terms of my own methodology to make it more of a thriving, a sustainable system. Because this is, quite often we're in such a hurry and like you say, it's all around the bottom line and profitability. And don't get me wrong, they're really important. But it comes back to my piece around
yeah, yeah,
system,
yeah.
culture, and you won't get the profitability if you have a broken system. Because when everyone's exhausted or there's issues in the system, you're not getting the best out of your people. And it's surface.
Yeah.
So
And you
coming in,
didn't take care of your car enough that it's being towed away.
yeah, absolutely. So
Great.
tell me a little
I
bit
don't have a
about,
car.
yeah, exactly. But healthcare, why is that system, why is it still, dare I say it, broken? Why, you specialize in healthcare from a wellness and coaching perspective.
Oh,
And you must, and it's something when you go to hospital and you see the nurses or, doctors, like you say, your husband, and I actually broke my finger last year, and I don't know if you can see that, but
Okay.
I can't even, and I had a hand therapist. I can't even bend it like I used to. My puppy,
Oh, yes.
but I had surgery on it. But I actually, and I was talking to the hand therapist. I was seeing her every other week, and it went on for a couple of months. And I was like, she
Mm.
became like my coach, my therapist as well, because I was still,
Yes.
working through my burnout. So it's twofold in a way
Yeah.
for me. Healthcare, why do you think the system is still broken? Why? But then also someone like you and your husband who's always been in the healthcare space, like how do you also
Mm.
make protect yourself? Because we've talked about setting boundaries and you're dealing with people with burnout. You're taking on a lot of their energy, a lot of their stuff. Yeah, two questions there.
Yeah. So it's a big question.
I know.
Um, and no, and I appreciate it because sometimes my answer is, whoever can figure that one out will get the Nobel Prize. Because it's that big. Here in the States, healthcare is just going to be blunt. It's that broken. It's still driven by insurance companies, um, and it's still driven by the bottom line. Part of the reason we actually closed our practice here in Massachusetts, because we were in private practice, we were not owned by a hospital because we wanted to do things a certain way. And again, here in Massachusetts, it just became unsustainable. You couldn't, you kept working harder and harder and making less and less. Um, so sadly, here in the States, and I would say it's not a health care problem because we care and we're trying as hard as we
Yeah, good
can.
point. Sorry. Yeah.
It's a health insurance problem, and it's a health coverage problem. Um, that is so broken that it brings me to tears how broken it is. Um, so that's part of the problem. So in the meantime, you still have to work, you still have to do it, is go for that low hanging fruit. Figure out where you can start to cut back on things. Look out for your team. If you're a leader, you are responsible for your team. And now I'm starting to say to the leaders, I'm like, if somebody burns out on your team,
On
that's
your
on you.
watch. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
That happened on your watch, and
Yeah,
I'm going to make sure that you understand that.
yeah.
And you're not to go back because you kind of beat the baloney out of this person, and you ran them into the ground, and your system ran them into the ground, and you need to be paying attention. So here, again, it's such a broken system. The problem is so huge. We're trying. And then in the meantime, you do that. I'm also encouraging every last person, make sure everybody on your team, I say this every quarter. So every 3 months, everybody should be taking the minimum of a day off. Nobody should leave any PTO time, paid time off, on the books. That's not okay. And you need to, when you leave, you need to be gone. The sad part too, there's a shortage. And, when somebody shows up too, it's tough.
Yeah.
And we see it as from the patient side of it too, and that's where it's frustrating. Again, it's going to reach breaking point here, and that really scares me. Um,
I think it's going to reach
that
breaking point everywhere, Lynn. I honestly do. I don't
oh,
think it's
okay,
just,
really,
I don't think
okay,
it's just, yeah, I don't think it is just a US thing. I mean, that's my
okay,
opinion. I'm sure people have
okay,
a
yeah,
different perspective, but I think it's going to have to reach breaking point for the system to fundamentally change. And I feel like that's the world
yeah,
we're in at the moment. We're in that transition from old world into this new world. And it's like we're at a crossroads.
yeah.
And like we can either stay here and continue in a broken system, or we can actually do something about it and actually do
Mhm.
something about it, not just say we're going to transactionally surface level do something about it to
Exactly, yeah.
take us into the new world where we do all thrive and it is a better space and place to be. Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
yeah, so I guess in the meantime, again, we continue to have these conversations. I think that's incredibly important. Again, here in the States, at least, the burnout, you don't see those talks anymore. I think it's like, no, 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 it's still there. It was big a problem before we got, I said, well, we got 15 minutes of fame talking about it. And all of a sudden everyone's talk about it and then everyone stopped talking about it. And it's tough, as a being on the patient side of things, sometimes too, they're like, well, we can't see you next week. We'll see you in 3 weeks or 3 months. Or there's one call I tried to make and they're going to see me next May. And, and because there's such a shortage too. So yeah, the system is bigger. In the meantime, coming back, go for that low hanging fruit
Right. Yeah,
you know
100%.
and sometimes even a nice maybe place to land this is a lot of like human nature too. We want to know that there's hope. That's the secret ingredient. And knowing like I hear you, I see you, I get it, I'm in the trench, we're in this together, we're going to try to figure this out. And hope, knowing like it's not you, it's the system, but let's work with what we have, is something to offer,
Yeah, I think so.
and a
Let's work.
place to maintain, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, let's work
In
with something
this.
that we have and let's try and let's reshape it. Let's start like don't just have to start all over again because that's exhausting in itself at times. But work with what we have and how do we make it better? How do we improve? How do we improve on it? I like that as a parting of our conversation. You just had me thinking, and one last thought, and I'd love your last thought on this is I wonder if we've stopped. I mean, burnout's still being spoken about to a degree, but I wonder if we've stopped talking about burnout because burnout equals individual. And yet, what you and I have been talking about a lot today is a system. And so, a system is an individual. We've talked about
Mhm.
a team and a system, right? And that's not for me individual. So maybe you and I need to create a new term for this that is like it still encompasses burnout, but it's a bigger issue than just an individual. And I think that
Yeah,
burnout, as
yeah,
we
and
know
thank
it,
you for that. Yeah,
yeah, is it? Yeah, sorry, you go.
yeah. If you really want to address burnout, you have to address the systems. You have to address the machines running, and if the machine has to be the person, you have to address that. It's a systems problem.
Hmm.
So you're putting, again, people in unsustainable positions, and it's your system that is burning out your best employees. And that's the part too.
Hmm.
It's the people that are in the game, and you're burning out your best players. So again, if you see one person on your team that's burnt out, that's on you, and it's time to do something because maybe the other 5 people just aren't speaking up, but maybe that one person just folded the first. So yeah, it's a systems problem. And that's one thing I've been shouting from the rooftops too. Every time I give it, I'm like, it's not an individual flaw
No, I agree.
that
Yeah,
you totally ran this person
yeah.
into the ground.
It's an
That's not
ecosystem.
okay.
Yeah, for me, it's an ecosystem. But oh my gosh, you've got me thinking a bit about this now in terms of how do we elevate it? So like burnout equals systems versus burnout equals individual. It's a good one to end with. So, Lynn, thank you so much. How do we find out more about you? Where do we get your TED Talk? I'll drop
TED
all the
Talk is
links.
TEDx is on YouTube. Lynn Festa TEDx. It's called Creating Sustainable Trust Through Integrity-Based Medicine.
Oh, I love that.
Um, yeah, yeah. And Lynn Festa Coaching, or lynnfesta.com actually is my website. And I'm LinkedIn, like the way we got to find each other,
Yeah,
which is I love.
absolutely, absolutely. Lynn,
Yeah,
this has
yeah.
been
So, and
such
I
a
love answering questions too. So
Oh, I
I
know.
love it.
I feel like I'm going to be
It
emailing
puts
you
me in
going,
flow.
please, yeah, go with the flow. Can we please catch up? No, Lynn, I've really enjoyed our chat, and I feel like we could, as always, could keep talking because there's so much to talk about in this. So maybe you and I will have a little ideation or a little creative brainstorming session and create something around,
I'd love
bringing this more to life in terms of, how do we make this at the forefront in terms of burnout and the system. Um,
Let's keep the conversation going, I
let's
think
keep the
is
conversation going. Yes. So thank you, Lynn. You have a lovely evening. I'll let you back to your evening. Speaking of setting boundaries, probably dinner time and all of that, and I'm just starting my day. But
yeah.
thank you,
You
Lynn. I
have a
really,
great day.
yeah, thank you, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.